So we're very happy today through the Emeriti Center's Living History Project to interview Professor Robert E. Coffey. He's Professor Emeritus, retired from the USC Marshall School of Business. In 1998, he retired after 35 years of service, and he remained an independent consultant until 2001. During his USC career, he was an early director of the Entrepreneur Program and director of the MBA program, and served twice as department chair. Bob co-authored 2 textbooks in organization management and was president of the USC Academic Senate, and served several years on the Senate Executive Board. He was elected to the Fellows of the Academy of Management in 1976 and participated in executive development programs both at USC and as an independent consultant. And he is a dear colleague of mine, especially because of his work during his time after retirement. He served as the president of the USC Retired Faculty Association and treasurer of a nonprofit association of retirement organizations in higher education, as well as treasurer of the University Park Investment Group. In addition, Bob has been an active Emeriti Center advisor, mentor, participant on the Benefits and Resource Committee, a valued mentor for many retired faculty and staff, widows and widowers, our social group, and many other things. And for his service to the Emeriti Center and service to the university post-retirement, he received the Paul Hadley Service Award in 2012. And so the purpose of the USC Living History Project is to capture the legacy of our very cherished professors and administrators at USC. And so we'd like to welcome Bob and start asking questions about the beginnings of your coming to USC, maybe your background and training before you even considered coming to USC.
Thank you, Janette. I graduated from college, small liberal arts college in the Midwest, Principia College, and went immediately to work in the industry with the Sherwin-Williams Company, never thinking I would pursue a academic career. About 3 years later, I was invited back to be assistant dean of men at Principia College, and I stayed there 4 years. And about the second or third year, a professor became ill, and they asked me to teach a course. I'll never forget, I had 35 students, and over half I had been in school with. They were good to me, and I tried to be good to them. That's really what got me thinking about going into the academic world. And I had left Principia to go to the University of Illinois in the doctoral program. I had, during this period, received an MBA at Northwestern, and so I had started my business education. And at Illinois, I took the PhD in business program, and I was recruited from Illinois to come to USC. Interestingly to me now, I was interviewed at an Academy of Management meeting in December in Pittsburgh. And in those days, they did not invite prospective faculty to come visit campus. And so this, my wife, who had never been west of the Mississippi, I, who had been to California once, came here really as neophytes. I wasn't quite sure whether USC was in Northern California or Southern California. And I arrived on the 16th of September, 1963, and immediately came to campus because school was starting. And that's how I got to USC. I remember a man named Paul Cohn, Professor Paul Cohn, was involved in recruiting me, and he would call during the spring. First question always was, how's the weather there? And in Champaign-Urbana, they had a very bad winter. And so he would say, I'm out in the yard looking at the orange trees. It sounded pretty good. And my wife and 3 children at that time came out, and that's how we started at USC.
So when you were first looking at USC and even considering USC, and then after you arrived, what were your first impressions of the university? I mean, we look at it now, it's this big prestigious university.
Yes. Well, that's an interesting question, because when I knew that I was a possible recruit at USC, I went in to see an old professor of mine. I say old, much younger than I am now. He had been at USC. He was chairman of their management department. He had been at USC in 1959. And when I told him I was considering USC, the first question he asked me was, are you sure they can pay your salary? And I thought he was kidding. He wasn't. He had been out here in the late 50s and said, the university's having severe financial problems. I had never thought about asking, can they pay my salary or what have you. And when I arrived, I found out 2 things. One, the endowment at USC during the 50s, I believe, was only about $5 million. And I then learned I was being paid on soft money. I had never heard of soft money. I learned that was money that was raised by the dean for use that was not part of the university budget. And so that was my start at USC. I quickly found it to be a very stimulating environment. At that time, they'd hired several new young professors, a couple who became real mentors of mine, one named Tony Athos, who had come from Harvard, and Harold Spear, who had come from Harvard. And they both took me under their wing, so to speak, along with a couple of other new professors who came in and did a wonderful job of welcoming and helping learn the ropes, get adjusted to the new environment. And it was a very exciting time to be here. I was involved primarily in teaching undergraduate courses. Tony Athos was here about 2 years before he returned to Harvard, became a very prominent professor there. And he and I did a textbook together for undergraduates in business, and that was a fun, exciting thing. It was really one of the first textbooks, I believe, in organizational behavior for undergraduates. And I didn't realize that at the time, but it was a good experience. I found it very helpful to be mentored by Hal Spear, who was also from Harvard, and Tony, and quickly became a Trojan, so to speak. Got seasoned football tickets and all the good things, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you became immersed in the USC culture fairly soon?
Very, very quickly, yes, and I loved it. It was an exciting place to be. But jumping ahead just a bit, USC at that time, this was 1963, and during the 60s was primarily a teaching institution. But in fact, people were beginning to talk about doing research. And virtually none of the senior faculty had done much research. And there was little guidance, but they knew they wanted the younger people to do it. And so there was quite an emphasis on that. And the university, to jump ahead, has changed dramatically, and now is one of the premier research institutions in the country, in the world, probably. But in those days, USC was really not a great institution. And jumping ahead again, I would say, without doubt in my mind, it has made more progress during the last half of the century than any other university in the United States. Just astounding to me when you look back where it's come from. And it was an exciting time to be in the university. The hiring of faculty every year became more interested in the research or the research potential. And I had been at the University of Illinois at a time when virtually the whole faculty retired as I left. I hope there wasn't a causal relationship there. And they had been primarily scholars, textbook writers, but really did not do hard research. And therefore, my program, I had not been trained to do that. But I loved the teaching part, and I loved the service part. And I spent much of my career doing a combination of teaching, research, or administrative work, and some research, but mostly textbook writing. And I loved being here during that time, but today it's a very different world here at USC. Yeah.
So, are there any particular administrators, presidents, deans that come to mind that helped you or that are
yes.
memorable in your career?
Well, yes, very definitely. Very briefly, one of at that time, Norman Topping, a medical doctor, was the president of USC, and my impression still is that he is the one that really started turning the university around, and he did a great job. I'll give you one example of something I thought was interesting. During the 60s, we called it the Days of Concern. The student body president set up a platform and was trying to rouse the students and was sort of castigating the university administration. And as he was talking, Norman Topping came up behind him without his knowing it, and the student body president said something like, that we're going to go to the administration and demand. And Norman Topping said, "Here I am," and began talking with him. He did a great job in starting USC's turnaround. And in the business school, a man named Robert Doxson was dean, and he worked very hard and began fundraising, connecting with the business community, began hiring young faculty to come in and did a tremendous job in helping the business school, which at that time I think was the largest or second largest school in the university. And Robert Doxson was a wonderful mentor for me. He gave me several opportunities to do interesting things, such as be director of the MBA program as it was just starting the day program. And he nominated me to be go on a journey for perspective. They only lasted a few years, but went around the world to give young faculty who had never had international experience a chance to see the world. Wonderful. So Robert Doxson did an enormous amount to start building the business school. As I mentioned, Tony Athos and Hal Spear were wonderful mentors in welcoming me and helping me get started, as well as others.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say are some of the accomplishments that you're most proud of during your 35 years in the business school?
Well, in the business school, one thing I will say.
You're now.
Yeah, wasn't that
you
significant?
You need to talk about some of these things, because I know that you're very humble.
One thing that I'm pleased about, I was an early department chair, and we began hiring very good people. And I hired people who were better than I, and I'm proud of that. I hired several at that time, and an example would be Larry Greiner, who came from Harvard, became one of our distinguished professors, and that was satisfying. And I also was an early director of the entrepreneur program. And that was exciting, because the entrepreneur program has developed into a world-class program. When I started, 2 young men started the entrepreneur program, and the year after they started, one left the university and the other resigned as director of the entrepreneur program. And a man named Jim Stevenson, who was an intern dean and director of the food management program, a wonderful guy. He and I drove into work together, and one day he said, "Why don't you take over the entrepreneur program?" And I said, "Okay." I didn't even know what that meant. And we established, we had no faculty, we had really no space, and we did get it started, and it has emerged into a wonderful program. We started at the MBA level, and I might mention one man who contributed enormously to it was a man named Ralph Carson, who was not a USC faculty member, but he was the partner in what became the largest advertising company in Los Angeles. And he loved students, and he came and joined the entrepreneur faculty, and he was the heart and soul of the early entrepreneur program. Love to tell you some stories about Ralph. He was instrumental in bringing the Los Angeles Dodgers here from Brooklyn. He was instrumental in helping Irv Robbins start Baskin & Robbins. He just a wonderful man who loved students and cared deeply about them. But that was an exciting thing, getting that started. And but I worked mostly, I did consulting for big companies. like State Farm Insurance Company, Lockheed Aircraft, etc. And I felt it was time to go, so I had an opportunity to go to a management institute in Switzerland for a year. It's called Emeriti at that time. And I spent a wonderful year in Lausanne, Switzerland, teaching middle level, about to go into upper management executives from about 15 to 20 different countries in each of 2 semester-long classes I taught. And that was a wonderful experience. I came back and rejoined the management faculty and became department chair again. And again, was hiring. And over that period of time, the qualifications for faculty had changed dramatically. And it was very tough recruiting. I remember being able to say, well, come to Los Angeles. We have a lot of smog, real estate is different, traffic is terrible, and but we offset that with their very average salaries. Actually, we were able to hire several very good young recruits from prestigious institutions. They caught what was going on at USC and wanted to be a part of it. And I was very pleased to be able to help in that process. Both the university and the business school were developing into really first-class institutions, and it was fun to see that. Became very difficult for young faculty. Our requirements for tenure were very stringent, increasing, and we had some really good people come in, and many of them didn't make it because of the strong recruiting requirements we had. But that was a very important time. Yeah. One thing I might say during my career at USC that really had a lot of influence on how my own personal career went. In the first year I came, I was invited to participate in the Lockheed Management Institute. And that was involving teaching people who were working in companies, not students. And I continued that through my whole career. And as I look back, probably did too much in management development, but USC's business school was greatly enhanced by having the associations with the companies, but also receiving the remuneration it did. And I devoted a great deal of my time to executive development program. The Lockheed program, for example, I continued with it through my entire career at USC. And because of that program, did some consulting with them, and that shaped my career. It was not conducive to helping me do research and that kind of thing. I enjoyed the practical aspects of teaching business, and it was wonderful to have contact with the real world, so I could use that in my classroom teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's what makes Marshall quite an interesting and unique culture for a school.
It is. But simultaneously, within the school, the emphasis on research increased each year. And the difference between when I came, when those senior people were doing it, more and more people were doing research, and we brought in some senior people, wonderful scholars, Ed Lawler, Steve Kerr, Ian Mitroff, Larry Greiner, people who were doing research. And so the younger people coming in had some mentors and some guides. And by the time I had left, the research requirements for young faculty were very high. We expected new assistant professors coming in to hopefully have at least one A-quality research journal as they came in to even start their careers. And they had to work very hard to get tenure. They had to teach well, because the teaching requirement was always important. But the real separation point was on who could get published. And so the institution, the business school and the university, over that 50-year period of the last century, really changed from a teaching institution to a combination teaching research.
Mm-hmm. So so that was quite the trend.
Yes.
The evolution of that.
It was, right. And still going on to some extent, yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you note any other kinds of changes that took place while you were working at the Marshall School, other than that kind of transition? The reason why I ask that is it seems like there's such a focus in the business school for finding jobs for students, or that kind of thing.
Yes, it is. I might say, before I answer that, one of the important things that happened in the last half of the century at USC, in my mind, was that when I came, USC was made up of, I think, about 21 professional schools, some of which were very good. School of Music, always ranked high nationally, but the liberal arts college was perceived to be somewhat weak. And one of the and very few prestigious universities have a weak college. And over the last 50 years, that's changed dramatically. And one of the things that's happened at USC that's very important, I think, is that there's more, recently, there's an emphasis on interdisciplinary work. And so if you have a major in business, you also ought to go into some field very different as a minor to broaden your experience. I think that's a wonderful trend. Mm-hmm. And what's happened is the university has become less filled with silos of people in their own area and interchanging. One of the things about the Emeriti Center that I found so wonderful was that people came from all different parts of the university and intermingled, and you had a sense of the whole university, not just your own little area. I had a little taste of, I was president of the faculty senate for 1 year and on the executive board for several. I might say one thing that stood out to me. When I was president, the faculty senate voted that it recommend to the university administration they get an 18% raise in pay. And I remember I thought that was outrageous, unrealistic, as indeed it proved to be. but here I was president of the group that I had to go with the group on that, and but that was a sign of the faculty beginning to play a more important role in the university, rather than have just totally a top-down administrative-driven university. The faculty became more involved, participated more. And one of the great leaders in the university, in my opinion, was Steve Sample, who came in as new president and did a wonderful job in lifting the level of everything. I think one other man I might mention, during Jack Hubbard's tenure as president, and he was a wonderful guy, but he had a provost that just really did wonderful things for the university in terms of strict requirements. He was a driver. He got helped the university move ahead very much. There have been many people. As one that I encountered very late in my career was Robert Biller, who came in, a wonderful man, high in the administration of the university, did much to develop faculty, improve the quality of the education, and then encountered Bob Biller in the Emeriti Center, where he made a wonderful contribution. Many people contributed that, and some in small ways that were important, some in more public, dramatic ways. But Bob Biller was a wonderful addition to the faculty.
Well, that leads me to think about the Emeriti Center, because you and I have been have known each other for almost 10 years as a result of our work together at the Emeriti Center. And I would say, in addition to Bob Biller, you have made significant contributions to the cultural change at the Emeriti Center in that, our motto is Colleagues for Life. And when I was first hired and on board, I think you did some significant work as a board member of the RFA, Retired Faculty Association, in bringing together the interdisciplinary, intergenerational groups of folks, but also bringing together the staff and the faculty, retirees. You want to say a little bit about that?
Well, it was a wonderful experience for me. Yes, after I retired, I did become a bit engaged with the Emeriti Center, and I came on the RFA board, which was at that time made up of some wonderful people who had been on, but they had been on the board for a very long time, and it was quite an entrenched, self-run kind of group. And I would say one of the things I found most satisfying as I worked on the board and had some leadership in it was that we sort of broke up the old guard kind of thing and started bringing in new people, more people, and it was very interdisciplinary. And there was a flow of people through the organization that really energized it, in my opinion. And simultaneously in the Retired Staff Association, when I started, there was quite a gap between the two. retired staff felt, hey, we've been serving you all of our careers, we're glad to be out from that. And the faculty had sort of a superior attitude, I think. I'm sure they would argue, some would argue with that, but through working with the two organizations together, we began to start thinking of each other as colleagues, and there's much more cooperation and work being done between the two. And the integration of those two, to quite an extent, I think was a very nice thing for the university. And I'm glad that I could be part of that. What the RFA and the Staff Retirement Association, with the Emeriti Center as the umbrella and the real driving force, has done is engage and include people who leave in retirement. Instead of just going off, they now have a home and can continue their contribution and association with the university. And that's a wonderful thing. And of course, the USC Emeriti Center, in my opinion, has been probably one of, if not the best in the country. It's been wonderful being just associated with how that has grown and developed. And you, of course, have made an enormous contribution.
Well, thanks, Bob. You know, you also received the Paul Hadley Award for service to USC. And that's for many of your contributions, not just the RFA or that kind of thing. You served as chair of the Faculty Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes.
And you made a significant difference in making that a better committee.
That was an interesting time. I was involved in selecting people for an award that I certainly wouldn't qualify for.
I don't know about
but
that.
It was, it gave me an appreciation for how fine the faculty at USC was. And that was a pleasure, yeah.
And that's a significant role that retirees can play, contributing value to the university.
Yes, right.
I think that that's great. Another thing that I did want to bring up is that you also served on our nonprofit board.
Oh yes, AROHI.
which is AROHI, which is the Association of Retirement Organizations in Higher Education, which really is the leader of best practices in higher education for retiree organizations. So you served as the president, as the treasurer, which is the most important thing, managing our money.
I enjoyed the years with AROHI because I believed in what it was trying to do, which was help people who retired have a continuation of a good experience. And very clearly, USC was a leader in this organization, but it was fun and interesting meeting people from other schools that were really not as far along as USC, and to know that USC and what we have learned would be helpful to them. And the association has done a nice job, I think, of helping schools throughout the country, both small, medium, and large, pay more attention to the retired faculty. I was the beneficiary of that at USC and glad to contribute in a very small way, nothing like you have done, to helping other schools follow in some of our footsteps on that.
And that's sort of what the Marshall School of Business, you were doing that as well. You know, USC was kind of the leader, But
It has emerged into a first-rate institution, yes, as has the university. And if I had an overall perception of my experience, it was fun to be part of the development of a university that started out, so teaching institution to emerge into the most enormous or wonderful world-class institution. And I think USC is that today. And incidentally, the endowment has soared. And that the money isn't as important as what that represents, the support and recognition from the community, but also those assets have helped the university develop and emerge as one of the leading universities in the country. And it's been fun to be part of that. Definitely. In a very small way.
Well, you certainly have been a part of that, and I personally would like to, and professionally, thank you for your service to USC as well as the Emeriti Center, the Retired Faculty Association, our nonprofit, and also to the spirit of the Trojan family that we have here at the university, but also our Colleagues for Life motto through the Emeriti Center, bringing together folks together, and for your, not only your service, but your generosity in terms of your time and your resources to USC have been greatly appreciated.
Well, thank you, Janette. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The end.